Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today is the start of season 11, which is all about the Oscars. Each episode, I'll host a panel of film industry professionals to discuss the nominees in their category of expertise. There will be 10 episodes total, and we'll release 2 a week between now and the 94th Academy Awards on March 27th. We're kicking it off this year with the nominees for sound, and I'm happy to welcome back some friends of the show. Steve Morrow, production sound mixer. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Glad you're back. Also returning is Don Sylvester, sound editor. Welcome back.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
Now, listeners, if you're curious about these guys and their film credits, look them up on the Internet Movie Database. Below the Line also has a page on IMDb, so you can start on a specific episode and simply click through to the film credits of our guests. The 5 films nominated for sound are Belfast, Dune, No Time to Die, The Power of the Dog, and West Side Story. We're going to discuss them in that order, and spoilers are possible, so consider this a warning. Gentlemen, let's jump right in on Belfast, and the team, apologies if I mispronounce any names, sound mixer Denise Yard, re-recording mixer / sound supervisor Simon Chase, sound supervisor James Mather, and re-recording mixer Niv Adiri.
I like Belfast as a movie. I thought it was an interesting take on, Bloody Sunday and what had all happened. For me, when you watch Belfast, the interesting thing that they did with the mix is they had a lot of the voices come out of different channels of sound, different speakers, from behind you to the right, to the left of you. That's not typical. Your typical dialogue comes out of the center channel, which is, right smack in front of you, right under or behind the screen. And to me, that was, successful in Belfast. Some movies do it and it's very distracting. But Belfast was able to pull it off. And so it felt like you were in the middle of the action, in the middle of the story, and you could hear where people were coming from. And I thought it was an interesting choice because it's, sometimes that's a dangerous thing to do because it can be distracting. And depending on how the speakers are set up in the theater or in your home, how you view it, that can be vastly different than the center channel sound. So I think they were able to pull it off in a way that put you in the middle of the story.
Yeah, Steve, you're absolutely correct that the important dialogue should come out of the center of the screen. Now, when they don't put dialogue in the center of the screen, to me, it tells me that's not important dialogue. That's stuff that is then used as sound effects. Now, this may sound silly that I'm going to say that dialogue is sound effects, but if you're in an atmosphere where there's a lot of talking, it's used as a sort of an effect of a place, and you're allowed to put that anywhere you want, as long as you're not telling people to pay attention to it. For example, if there's somebody's talking in the middle of the screen and someone's talking behind you, you're not supposed to pay attention to that person behind you. That's supposed to be just there as a background atmospheric thing. And there's so many perspectivizing and atmospheric approaches to the dialogue in this film that they used a lot of the dialogue as sound effects. And that's why I think that they're given credit and not scorn for taking the dialogue off the center of the screen.
I would say 99% of the time, the dialogue comes out of the center channel. That's where the voices are heard. And sometimes, it can be distracting to all of a sudden hear a voice coming out of the back of the theater, when you're used to hearing it, on the screen. I think Birdman did it years ago fairly well. There's been a few movies that have done an interesting job of it. But yeah, in Belfast, I just felt like, puts you in the center of the action, gives you an understanding of where people are in the world. But it can sometimes have the opposite effect where it's very distracting. And in this one, I was pleasantly surprised that it worked so well.
When we start these conversations, I like to sort of go back and have a little roundtable about what is good sound, why are we nominating these pictures for sound, and who cares about sound and who doesn't care about sound. If you look at all these nominees, you couldn't get a broader spectrum of movie genres. So Belfast, in alphabetical order, is up because, in my opinion, there's a lot of people that say the Academy Awards can be not best sound, but most sound. It's almost like, the louder the better, and we've been fighting that for a long, long time. And so to see something like Belfast show up, which is an amazing balance, really, of sound and dialogue. I mean, there's a real lack of score too, which allows more sound to be featured. So to ask yourself, well, why is Belfast considered best sound when it's not most sound? For me, is because it kind of represents a particular directorial perspective that is presented through the sound. The storytelling is presented through the sound. And a lot of movies will augment the story, or they'll just blow things up, or they'll have really cool sounds. But you don't really have to have a wide palette of sounds in a lot of movies, because what you see is what you get. In this movie, it's basically a perspective of the kid Buddy, who is, I guess, Kenneth Branagh. It's his point of view of the world. So everything is very subjective. It's memories of sounds. It's just a collage of information that's presented to you in a way that tells the story. I like that idea a lot. I like it better than, say, a war movie that just has a bunch of bullets and things like that, which is cool. I like sound. But when it helps tell the story, if it gives you a particular point of view and it's done through sound, I give it high marks, and I'm really pleased to see this movie on the list.
Yeah, for me, it was a surprise, early indicator that this movie would be nominated. That got me the interest. You look at all the different rankings online, and what people predict will be the prediction, right? And so I watched Belfast pretty much early on, and I thought, okay, this is an interesting sound film, just because a lot of the story is told, budgetary wise. Sometimes it's hard to recreate something that big, but with sound, I think on Belfast, you're able to give it a bigger environment, as opposed to just that one street that we see throughout the whole movie.
I think what it does effectively is it gives you what all movies try to do sonically, and that is a personality of place. Like, you eventually begin to identify the sounds of the area as natural sounds, as common sounds, and then it tries to interpose uncommon sounds, like the invasion of the violence that comes into the neighborhood. And I think they do that very well, and especially when they're perspectivizing it or subjectivizing it through the character of Kenneth Branagh as a kid. So, I mean, you get the sense of where they live and what's happening that's unusual, and that's all done through sound. There's a depth of voices in the very opening sequence. I mean, you hear dialogue of people in the street. It's just a lively interchange of people in the street, and you get a sense of who they are and where they are. And then at the same time, you get this riot that comes and invades, and it's effective because it's treated in a way that we don't know everything. It comes to us in different waves of information, and we eventually learn what's happening story-wise. And that's what they do throughout the whole film. They take the limited information that the kid gets, and they teach us what's happening. And for me, that's the best use of sound you can do. You can actually select what you want people to hear, when you want them to hear it, and you're not painting the whole canvas with a big fat paintbrush. You're doing little paint by numbers here and there, and I think it's compelling and intriguing. I think it brings you into the story.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's there's a delicate balance there where you could overdo it, but I don't think they did. I think they did a great job.
Yeah, they did a great job too. And what's interesting is there is very little score in it. I mean, there's a lot of source cues and things like that, and it's hard for me to pick out re-recorded dialogue. Like, most of it sounds like it's production, and to me, that's a tribute to the way it's been recorded and shot. and the care they've taken into actually getting the performances, first time around without having to go back and fix a lot of the sound. So, yeah, high marks for me.
Now, gentlemen, we had hoped not to be talking about it again this year, but COVID has affected or influenced a lot of people in the fact of not seeing these in the theater. Now, again, you guys have sound setups that you're going to catch it, but for the general viewing audience, do you think some of these subtleties we're talking about from a sound perspective are going to be lost by watching it at home versus in the theater?
I think you lose a lot when you don't see it in the theater, any movie really, because the movie's made for the theater experience. So sure, something will be lost, but it's also important to be safe and careful. So everybody has their own gauge of that. So I think, yeah, I mean, if the ultimate choice is safety versus seeing it in a theater, maybe you pick safety. But I think once it becomes clear that COVID is down and it's easier to see movies in theaters, I think that's the best experience you can have, seeing any of these and hearing any of these films.
I saw Belfast in the theater, and what you see and hear in the theater, and I also saw it at home as a second time. You can't say enough about the audience in a movie theater, because you don't get that at home unless you've got a very noisy bunch of people with you. I think that the reaction of the audience in the theater was as interesting as some scenes in the movie, and how they really embraced this movie and how they were pulling for the main characters was palpable. I could tell. And I like that a lot in movie theaters. I've seen a couple of these nominees in theaters, but I haven't seen all of them. And, I've said this 1,000 times, and I'm probably going to have this on my tombstone, is that you don't know what you're hearing at home. You don't know what people have as they have a sound bar from, or do they have a big theater set up, or do they just have a Sylvania TV is my favorite reference, and they've written to me and told me to stop, but I don't care. You just don't know what you're getting. And when people spend hours and weeks and days and long nights mixing these movies in theaters, that's the ideal situation, and you don't get it at home. And a lot of times when it goes through somebody's TV, maybe their TV has an algorithm that translates it into their TV, and it's completely different. So, I mean, we don't know, God bless us all. I hope this COVID goes away soon, but I don't think you can really tell what the filmmakers intended at home. I mean, you get a passing grade, but I don't think you can really tell.
The next film on our list is Dune. Sound mixer Mac Ruth, supervising sound editor Mark Mangini, sound designer / supervising sound editor Theo Green, re-recording mixer Doug Hemphill, and re-recording mixer Ron Bartlett.
Dune. That's a movie where if you're watching it at home, you're probably going to lose half the sound. I mean, it has a very low end quality to that film. Although I do have to say, my caveat for this whole conversation is I've seen all of these movies at my house. We don't leave unless I'm working. And if I'm working, then I don't put the production at risk by going out and doing anything. Anyway, that's been our kind of go-to for the last couple of years. But Dune was an experience visually and sound wise. I thought that's such a difficult movie to make sense, in that terms. I mean, the original Dune was kind of a mess all over the place, and this was a great reimagining of a movie that would be incredibly hard to make. So I give kudos to Mac Ruth, who recorded it on set. I'm sure that was not easy with everything blowing and sand and wind and effects. But yeah, I mean, it made you feel, at least when I was watching it, I felt like, yep, I'm on Arrakis, and it is not a comfortable place to be. But yeah, I mean, they pulled off a lot of tricks that I thought were pretty great, pretty interesting.
Here's a movie that is made to win awards, and I won't be surprised if Mark Mangini has a lot of videos of him on the set recording things, or going on in his backyard and re-recording things, or I mean, there's just a lot of care taken into presenting this film. as a sonic masterpiece. Now, not to say it's not a sonic masterpiece. However, it's the kind of movie that if it doesn't get nominated for a sound, they really haven't done their homework. I mean, it's a science fiction. It's got military vehicles. It's got incredible visual effects. It's got an amazing score. If these things don't all conspire together to make your sounds that you put in there excellent, you know, you're in the wrong business. So it's really excellent work all around. However, I sometimes wonder if the overpowering score I'm hearing is score or is it sound effects. And I do think that they do that. They do sort of pass the hat back and forth. I don't know sometimes if it's sound effects. If it is music, then, you know, they're doing a good job with the sound effects if it's music. And if it's all sound effects, you know, they should make an album because it sounds like music. So all of this stuff conspires. I think it's all very good stuff, but it's kind of like the first one on the list. Everybody goes, well, we got to put Dune on the list because it's got so many things going for it.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a technical award magnet.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, deserved, but yeah, it's a giant, I mean, that's a big movie.
It's a big movie. Yeah. And they planned it well and they executed it well and they had a budget, you know. I mean, a couple of these movies we're going to talk about later, they don't have a budget. So again, I asked the question about why are we here? What is good sound? Is good sound, you know, a big budget, a lot of talented people and unlimited resources and all the time in the world? Or is it the storytelling aspect of a movie that manifests itself in a way that is intrinsic to the value of the movie itself and contributes on a level that you may not even know, but it's there. I mean, there's so many different gradients of what good sound is. And Dune is good at it. I mean, they've got the advantage of creating sounds that never existed before. And with that, you know, that's a real heavy duty kind of sound effort. Like, this is a machine you've never seen before. And doesn't it sound like a cool machine? Yes, it does. It does. But we don't know what the machine really, I mean, it's made up. So it's in somebody's computer. So to make it sound real is a real accomplishment. But that's like, you could have made it sound different and it would have been good. They could have done 6 different ways. And the 5th one the director likes, but the other 5 were like just as good. They're all different. So I guess what I'm saying is, although I like this movie and I think I love the movie and I think the sound is excellent, I just think it's a no-brainer on this one. And sometimes I'm not inspired by that. Although if this one is selected as the winner, it certainly will deserve it.
Absolutely, yeah.
You guys talk to me a little bit more about how, in general terms, the score can interact with or override or support. Don, you suggested that as well. What's done in the sound mix?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Don has probably the most hands-on experience with this. There's that delicate balance between the film sound and the score. And sometimes it can, you know, you can have a composer that just overdoes it and just lumps it on, and then it destroys all your work.
Well, when you've got composers scoring events like sound effects, which used to be a real issue, like the explosion would have a big, you know, crescendo in the music, and there'd also be explosions, and the mixer would turn around and go like, you want to hear the bomb or do you want to hear the music? And they go like, we'll play both. But you end up featuring one over the other, and 9 times out of 10 it's the music, because that's the emotional cue. So scoring this movie, like Dune, I found that there was a lot of drones going on, and drones and low end and sort of like, you know, continuous tones are something that we try to reserve in the sound effects department. But if the music is similarly composed, then you cross the line. You don't even know what you're listening to or where it came from. I mean, and that doesn't matter to the viewer because it's cohesive. But when we're trying to break it down and say who's good at this and who's good at that, it's hard for me to tell that literally, I mean, hard for me to tell sometimes if that's score or if that's a background drone happening, which is a cool sound, or is it made by some guy with an oboe.
especially in Dune. I mean, that's
especially in Dune. Yeah.
yeah. That line gets crossed probably left and right.
Yeah. I've been on many films where we try to coordinate with the composer, and limited success. I mean, the composer will want to. I mean, it's like a hat on a hat. Like you're doing a big scene where there's a lot of sound effects, and the composer is motivated, but to write a lot of music, and it's like, well, you got to play feature one over the other, and most of the time, the music wins, just because of the nature of the movie-going experience.
The third film on our list is No Time to Die. Production sound mixer Simon Hayes, supervising sound editor Oliver Tarney, co-supervising sound editor James Harrison, re-recording mixer Paul Massey, and re-recording mixer / sound effects editor Mark Taylor.
No Time to Die, little James Bond for this year's Oscars. I would say, Simon Hayes being the production mixer, he's been one of those guys that, if it's a movie that he did, the dialogue and the sound from the set are going to be impeccable. I mean, his work is always fantastic, but he puts a lot of care towards that. Not taking anything away from that, he's incredible at his job. And then you have 007, which is big action, guns, car chase. That's the big sound movie. Where it's the action film that's just wall-to-wall sound. So it sounded amazing. It helps tell the story, but does it stand out from other 007s? Maybe, because it's the last one for Daniel Craig. I mean, I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was great, sounded great. But it goes back to Don's earlier statement that sometimes it's just, obviously you have to have a sound there and you have to have it match what the image is showing. But I don't know that, it's one of those things. Is this another character in the film to help push the story artistically, or is it just sounds for sounds?
Some of these guys on this crew have made Bond films before. I mean, this may be like their third Bond film. So they're no slouches when it comes to this. I mean, a Bond film has guns and vehicles and fist fights and daring do, close calls. Everything is a sonic event, and it has to be because it's an action movie. The nice thing is you get to record an Aston Martin this time around. You get to record a DB5 or whatever they are. They got to record other vehicles. It's nice to have a budget and get your bespoke sounds. All that's really good, and it's in general it's excellent. It's excellent sound. Again, I ask myself, well, what do we expect? We expect this to be excellent. I mean, it is excellent, and we expect it to be excellent.
Yeah, it's a Bond film. I mean, it's gonna sound amazing.
Yeah, it's got to sound amazing.
Yeah,
there's a lot of not taking anything away from Bond film here, or this one in particular, but there's a lot of great action movies that have great sounds. I thought The Matrix sounded great. It didn't come.
The Matrix was really great.
It didn't get nominated. There's a lot of great action sound movies out there that people just dismiss. And I'm sorry to say, it's more common than not to have excellent sound, and really, passable movies just get overlooked. The reason this one's not being overlooked is, I guess, Daniel Craig. As you say, let's watch this movie because we can cry in our beer, and this is the last Daniel Craig movie. So it probably gets more attention than most. Did I think this was Oscar worthy? Yeah, I do. I think it's Oscar worthy. I do, in the sense that it is what we expect it to be, and it's well done. These are very highly skilled craftsmen, and I think that what they've done here, they are very proud of, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to take anything away from it. I mean, the movie sounds incredible, but it comes down to is there a difference between Bond and The Matrix in sounding incredible? No. If either one of them didn't sound good, it's a failure. The movie doesn't work. But
exactly. No, that was my feeling about Dune was the same thing. If it didn't sound great, you shouldn't be in the business. So the Bond film, again, is it outstanding enough to be selected as the most impressive sound display this year. And then for me, then it goes beyond, well, it was excellent sound. It was really good for the movie, but was it unique? What did it have? Did it have any kind of special thing about it that makes it like you want to talk about it in your sound class at whatever high school you go to? And so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I had a director once tell me on set, which was, Jason Reitman told, we had this conversation about sound and best sound. And, his perspective on it was, is sound another character in the movie that helps propel the story? Obviously, if there's no sound in the movie, the story doesn't go very far. But particularly, is sound another character that helps tell that story versus just there's sound that matches the images in the frame? So, and that could be both, but it's that's something that I always look at when I watch a movie. Because you look at the Matrix kind of a movie and you go, yeah, it sounds incredible. There's new sounds in there, but without them, it's not another. You look at Belfast and the backgrounds and all that sound. That's a character in the movie. That's putting you in that place. And Dune is the same thing. It's these dark groans. It's this new world that you're in, and so that's putting you in this place. And not to take away from Bond, but the Bond sounds are these amazing, great sounding. It's a great sounding movie, and the dialogue is crisp and everything is clean. But it's at the end of the day, I don't know that I think of Bond as a sonically another character in the movie.
Right.
But it's an amazing sounding movie. So it's a tough. That's like that tightrope of saying, yeah, it's not. Nobody did a poor job. I mean, it's an incredible job. But at the end of the day, I don't know that it's another character in the film that propels the story.
And do you want to have like sounding films always win? I mean, again, do you go for the more sounds versus the best sounds?
Right. I mean, I think there's a lot of reason why there's not a lot of Marvel movies that get nominated for best sound. It's not that they don't sound good. They just may not be a character in that film that propels the story forward. I mean, of course they sound great. They have to.
Yeah. Well, sometimes when you actually trick out all the sound effects in a very active movie, you get sonic fatigue after a while because not everything is 100%. And in some of these movies, everything goes from 0 to 60 or 100%, like instantly. I think recently people have realized that you have to have a little downtime in these things, but then the third act is 25 minutes of nonstop sound explosions and whooshes and incredible things, and you get sound fatigue. So again, I have to sort of say they're all excellent movies, but why are we pointing to this one in particular? Why is it worthy of the whole industry saying it's the best this year? Why? And there's got to be something different to it. I mean, maybe it's the jalapeno on the burger. I don't know, but it's got to be something different.
Well, I'm very interested to hear what you both have to say about the fourth film on our list, The Power of the Dog. Production sound mixer Richard Flynn, supervising sound editor Robert McKenzie, and sound effects editor / re-recording mixer Tara Webb.
The Power of the Dog. Hard movie to make. I always say it every year. Western. Hard movies to make. So hats off to the production team on that one. It's not easy.
This is a movie that has, I would say, a fraction of the sound budget that No Time to Die or Dune have. I'm just guessing. They only have 3 people nominated here. So it does say small crew, small budget. And here's one where you have to ask yourself, what are we going for here? Why do we even need sound? I mean, the reason this has probably been selected is that people bought into the place of it all. And they felt like they had gone to a place, they had traveled to a place in the film that they had never been to before, and they experienced it, part of which was due to the sound. So that's really good on one level. It's also very hard to pinpoint an event that says, here's good sound, because it's very low key, very subtle. And it's almost laconic, the film sometimes. They've got an old period car, they've got horses, and the whole thing is a Western of very limited scale. So while I enjoyed the film and I thought they did a great job, I'm having a hard time comparing it to, say, any of these movies on the list because of its limited presence, and it's designed that way. So let's not pretend that they're failing. They're not. They're just the perspective of the sound is to be subtle and supportive, and it's effective that way. And it's actually very good that it's among this group here because we need more movies that have less sound because of the fact that the sound itself needs to be more selective in some movies and less wall to wall sort of events. So if you can tell the story and infuse your sound in it in a way that's subtle, I think you should get noticed as well, even if you don't have a big spaceship or a Aston Martin or something.
Well, it's kind of a nice movie, just like Belfast, where I think the general academy and maybe the general population think of sound as the loudest movie, and I think that these are the movies that kind of will hopefully make people recognize that it's not just about the loudness and the wall to wall sound. It's more about the subtleties and what is sound is providing you as the viewer, the experience. And so, yeah, it may is it the one of the 5 best sounding movies of the year, according to the Academy. It is, but there might be other movies you could slot in there that nobody would be sad about. But I do think it's a great sounding film. I mean, the dialogue sounds nice, the atmosphere, it puts you into that world, and it's subtle. Like Don said, it's the budget is probably the catering budget for Dune. Post production is their whole budget, but what they were able to do with it is amazing. So the sound, it's a good sounding movie that's not wall to wall sound. So hopefully it makes people really think about what qualifies as better sound. It's not more sound. It's what tells the story better.
Right. I agree. And I think it does a really good job. The only problem I'm having is comparing it with other films in this list because you can't compare. This is the difficult thing about sound being so subjective and using it for different purposes. I mean, you can use it to fix problems in many ways, or you can use it to support the storytelling, or you can use it just to get out of the way, and it's still effective that way. I mean, a lot of people take sound out for a dramatic moment. And so it's hard for this film, for me, to be compared with other films in this list. Every once in a while, we come across one of these that.
I think it was last year, the animated movie, right? Was that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I was going to say that. I mean, like, how do you compare this movie? I mean, there's so many movies that are largely production. And this is, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a whole lot of sound effects there that sound like production. But I do think that the production played a really big role in this film, and I think that's an art that people don't recognize as sound. They think it's just normal. I mean, like, I told my mother what I do. We had all the sound in the movie, and she said to me, "Well, wasn't there a microphone on the set? Why do you have to add all the sound?" And
it's funny because I get the opposite reaction from my family. Yeah, I record the actors on set. Yeah, but don't they just stand in front of a screen and re-say their lines? And then I think, well, no, not unless I messed it up or something happened.
To go back to what you said earlier, Steve, about the sound being a character in the film, it seems on a smaller, more subtle film like this is the opportunity to make sound a character. In other words, that the boots are different, or that something about those sort of extra sounds are a chance to add to the character. And whether you think this film had that opportunity and did it or didn't do it, I'm curious if you noticed on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I told you, okay, if I'm going to hire you to do sound on a Western, give me some library sounds of a Western. What are you going to give me? The boots, the spurs, the horses, there's certain things that you just naturally put in there that is expected. And so the choice of having or not having those is an obvious choice. It's like you can pick or choose to have them or not have them. But I think That's one of those hard. It's a hard movie to say that they made that choice out of propelling the story or not, or less it's just, because it is such a sparsely soundscaped film. My gut tells me it's their choice, but yeah, I mean, Don would have more of an insight into, maybe because maybe it just gets too overwhelming and all of a sudden it becomes a show about boots and feet.
Back to sound being a character. I think sound is character, meaning that maybe there is a character in the sound, but I think that we only add sound when it fits the character. For example, the boots, the way a guy walks, the sound of his boots is entirely character driven. It has to match his persona, his personality. Let's say there's an issue here where you don't think he comes in forcefully enough, where you can fix that in the boots that you re-record and give them a little forceful attack, and the character now is more forceful.
Well, that'll take us to the fifth and final film on our list, West Side Story. Sound mixer Todd Maitland, re-recording mixer / sound designer / supervising sound editor Gary Rydstrom, supervising sound editor Brian Chumney, re-recording mixer Andy Nelson, and scoring mixer Sean Murphy.
West Side Story. We got the musical film for this category. Lots of singing, lots of dancing. I imagine, 1950s New York sounds very different than 2020 New York or 2019 New York. A lot of magic in that. I thought the mix between the vocals and the singing was fairly seamless. I mean, sometimes you get this huge difference when it goes from production dialogue to playback. Certainly with musicals, that's easy to do. I've done plenty of musicals where it's, we're next to a freeway having a conversation and then they break out in the song and it goes completely silent, because that's just nature of making the movie. So it's an incredibly difficult tightrope to walk post-production wise to, make sure that singing matches, what it should sound like in that environment. So I think they did a great job in driving that forward and making a good music, making the musical sound like it was, maybe live recorded, maybe not, question mark.
In a lot of ways, this West Side Story reminds me of the approach that Belfast took, in the sense that at any one time there could be a dozen people mic'd up and talking. And I know Todd Maitland, he had to wire everybody, and that's a tough job. People don't think about it, but when you got 20 people with mics in the scene, that's a tough job. That's where the comparison ends with Belfast, because even though they record everything, they don't. All the music is pre-recorded and all the singing is pre-recorded. So, again, as Steve said, 1 minute they're talking in the middle of New York. Next thing you know, they're singing and dancing on the soundstage in Brooklyn, and it's a little different sounding. So then they have to go and put back the sound that they take out, and so there's a whole lot of Foley in this movie. It's like I hear people's feet everywhere. I mean, I've been attacked by 11-year-old boys saying, like, why do we always have to hear the feet? And I don't have an answer for that, especially when they're too loud. I don't like, and I'm not, what else are you going to do with people singing and dancing? You're going to put their feet in. I mean, you have to do that. But if you're really in the scene where people are singing and dancing and you're not re-recording the soundtrack, you're not going to hear their feet. So it's hard. You just have to put in sound that you wouldn't normally hear. And that's the problem they have, is that a lot of this stuff takes place in the middle of the night. The backgrounds are really quiet. They're dancing in the middle of the street. You just hear their feet, and that's it. And the singing and dancing, of course. So it's hard. It's almost like an animated feature in the sense that it's hard. They take out so much sound and they put back so little sound because it's music. And also, it's a stage play. So at what point, I mean, nobody dances in real life. This is not true. The Sharks didn't have that great choreography in real life. They didn't. So when are you going to break the law and say, well, don't pay any attention to this? It's not real. We're just making a stage play. At what point did the sound come in and say, like, well, this makes it real? And they go, well, we don't need sound now because we're basically on, we're on a stage in New York somewhere. This is just a stage play and it's a musical. So adding too much sound is like, you're fighting the fact that this is a theatrical production. So why would you consider it great sound? You would probably consider it great sound because you like the music and you like the scoring of it. And this is where the combination of music and sound get in the way of each other, because now people are saying it's great sound, but they're probably really saying it's great music. No offense, Gary. I'm not saying it's not good sound. I'm just saying that I worked on a movie, Walk the Line, where they said it was great sound, but they really were saying that they liked the music. And I understand the difference. And in this case, I think it's music driven. That's why it's getting a lot of notice.
Yeah, I think the mix does, help not throw you out of the movie every time they're singing and dancing, going from dialogue to singing and dancing. Like, sonically it could go completely dead and sound like they're just hitting play on a CD, but so that helps. But yeah, at the end of the day, is it do you love the music and the dancing as part of the sound, or is it the backgrounds and the toe scrapes and those all those things that add to it, to making it so that it's not this sound desert once music starts going? But is it necessary? I mean, is in like Don was saying, in real life, are people getting out in the middle of the street dancing and singing? And in real life, probably not. So why do we try to make it sound real? That's the question. But
yeah, I mean, it's not real. So
yeah,
why are we making it sound real? Well, we're just trying to make it sound cohesive, and we don't want to distract from anybody by having people break into song. I do think that they put in a lot of sound backgrounds, music, just sound effects backgrounds, knowing that they're going to have to break away into pre-recorded musical numbers, and they'd have something left to play behind it, so that it wouldn't fall off a cliff. And some of that was, for somebody like me who is in sound, that was obvious. I could hear it. But I think just for the casual viewer, I don't think they would. I think that's the only way you can do it, is you have to have some sound that carries into the singing and dancing.
Yeah, and it's always a choice. It's always a director's choice. What they want it to, what they want to hear. And it's a lot of the time it's, I'm going into a musical in a couple weeks that we're going to start filming, and there's a ton of conversations. Do you want them to sing live? Do you want it to be straight playback? And what are the differences? And for the most part, at least on my side of the scale, I always like to try to do it as live as you can, because the performances are better in the space that they're acting in versus the studio that was pre-recorded 2 months earlier. But sometimes you're, doing a movie that takes place in 1900 and the camera's on the side of a freeway looking the other direction. And so the audience isn't going to know that was the challenge. And so do you, try to get it live there and have it make no sense sound wise, or do you do playback and it makes total sense because, it sounds good like it should? So, I would imagine that there's a few live numbers in West Side Story, just some of the intimate stuff, or at least bits and pieces of it, to make it feel more real. And that's, on set, Todd did a great job. I mean, he's a good mixer, good, he does great work. And yeah, it's a lot of work, those movies.
Have you guys seen Cyrano? Here's another musical, which I think they sang on set. I'm not sure. Can anyone confirm that?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It just seemed to be more organic. Their singing, it seemed to be attached to their bodies better.
Yeah. I've done a few, like La La Land for me was, Emma Stone's performance in La La Land was always live. But like her roommate song, a lot of the roommates, that was all pre-records. And then anytime Emma Stone comes in, we ducked the music, we recorded her vocal, and then the music would come back up for the other roommates. So it's a weird mix of both live and playback in the same scenes, which, like we talked about, it makes the post mix a little bit more challenging, obviously, because, we're basically hitting the mute button, once music comes in, that just gets deleted and has to be, patched up later. So, but yeah, I mean, that's an example. Like that movie is an example of, you do some things live and you do some things pre-record, like Ryan Gosling on the end of the pier. That's all just him lip syncing. That's just the pre-record played back. Whereas Emma Stone's, big song about her audition, her big audition song, that's all live, because those are the moments where I think you take a chance and hope the actor's voice, holds up, but you'll get a better performance out of it, versus something that was pre-recorded months earlier when you're maybe not fully in character yet. It's a tightrope, because there's the technical aspect of it going, well, if they come in with a sore throat, does that ruin your day? And the answer is no. You pre-record it, you get the pre-record. Obviously the studio wants to hear the music before they approve the budget anyway. So you get the pre-record as your backup. And on the day, if they can sing and it sounds better than what the pre-record is, that's what you record. So anyway, West Side Story, they probably did a little bit of that throughout. Some of the bigger numbers, definitely no. You don't spend the time doing a 20 people dancing and singing in the middle of the street. It would just be hard to sing and dance. But yeah, some of the other intimate numbers, you probably go for some live singing if the actors are up for it.
Yeah, there's some physical actions going on in those dances. I would imagine they would be a little bit out of breath.
Yeah.
Are there other films that came out last year that were notable from a sound perspective that didn't make this list for either of you?
Well, I mentioned The Matrix, which I thought was clever in the sense that it gave us a reference to the original Matrixes and then built on it. And I think anybody who actually follows The Matrix would have noticed that. And I thought it was, again, it had to be excellent sound because it was so action driven. And I think they did a good job. And that was completely overlooked. Spider-Man was completely overlooked. I thought that was a good sounding film.
I did Ghostbusters. Not that, that to me, that was a great sounding movie. They took great care in, using some of the original sound effects from the 80s, remastered them and made it so that, because it's easy just to recreate it, but it's, you're paying tribute to the original. And so I think there's plenty of movies. I think every year there's plenty of movies that get overlooked, but it's because the categories, you're picking 5 movies. Although this year they did a weird thing. The Academy, Don will know this also, that we had to vote on a short list of movies in early December. So pick your top 10 movies that will be, of those 10 movies, 5 of them will get nominated. And it's the first year that I remember them doing that. And they did it at the beginning of December. And there was a handful of movies we couldn't see yet.
Yeah.
Spider-Man was one of them.
It was nowhere to be seen. Yeah.
Yeah. You couldn't see it until, a few weeks ago. And it's like, that short changes some movies, and the studios are going to have to adjust to release them early to the Academy, or else they get overlooked just because there's no way to see or hear it. And I feel like West Side Story was one of those movies that wasn't available to see, but we just assume it's going to sound good. So we're going to vote it in the short list and then hopefully see it before we voted on the permanent nomination list. It's a bit of a weird year because it's the first time that they've done it, but and I think they'll adjust, or the studios will have to adjust to it. But yeah, I mean, I remember thinking, well, I couldn't see The Matrix. I couldn't hear that. I'll assume it's going to sound good. I'll put it on the short list, but that's not really fair to movies I have seen that I thought sounded good. Because what if The Matrix was a total, what if it was a train wreck? It wasn't, but what if it was? And then I picked it because I just couldn't have heard it earlier. So yeah, I think every year there's plenty of movies get overlooked. I mean, there's incredible sound work across the board in our business. And I think it's not that they're overlooked so much as there's just not room, right? I mean, there's probably 30 amazing sounding movies that all deserve a place, but there's only 5 spots.
Yeah, I still think we're victims of the pandemic because of the release schedule and the fear of the theater, or fear of getting a streamer bootlegged, or whatever fears we have. They don't send out physical DVDs much anymore, if at all. So you either have to wait at home and watch it at home, or go into a theater and run the risk of catching a disease or something. So yeah, I think that the schedule has been screwed up in a way that they're holding back certain films for release purposes, and it has hurt them in the run towards the awards season. But then again, there's going to be a lot that are going to be overlooked. I mean, this category to me is like best food, and Everybody has an opinion about their favorite food, and it's not always the same.
Right. It can't always be never-ending breadsticks,
Pizza.
Yeah.
Pepperoni.
Well, gentlemen, always appreciate you guys coming in and giving us this additional insights into these films. Once again, thanks so much.
Thanks for having us, and we'll see you at the Oscars.
Yeah, good luck, everybody.
Listeners, that's a wrap. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, please visit our website, belowtheline.biz. That's B-I-Z. It's easy to peruse past episodes, and you'll find links to all of our social media. That includes our page on IMDb, where, as I mentioned earlier, you can learn more about my guests. Thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and all of you for sticking with us. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts, and tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line.